The Town of Barnstable Shellfish Committee meeting to order on this February, 8th, 2023. You know what I don't have? Amy, do you have an agenda? Oh, I have it. Never mind. Got it. I was looking at Gina. Also, we'll read a notice of recording. Please note that tonight's meeting is recorded and broadcast on Channel 18, and in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting and to please make their presence known. Anybody taping the meeting? Okay, great. Let's do a roll call. Start with DJ, if you would, please.
DJ Crook.
Bill Charabon.
Al Burnett.
Patricia Farina.
Paul Cusack.
And Stuart Rapp. Are you a new member of the committee?
Oh, no.
Okay. Would you like to be?
Maybe someday.
All right, so the meeting's been called to order. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the January 11th meeting. Patricia, would you move those minutes, please?
I move that we approve the minutes for the January
11th.
11th, 2023 meeting minutes.
They've been moved. Do I hear a second? Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. I'm going to recuse myself because I wasn't here, but all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Great, thank you. Natural resources, chairman's comments, I don't have any at this moment. Chairman's, our natural resources report,
Okay, so
please.
as discussed last month, I didn't think it would be extremely beneficial for us to do comparisons of permits sold from 2022 compared to 2023 because we have switched to a January 15 expiration and have also offered a discount to people to renew their 2023 permit early. So far, since we have put permits on sale, we have sold 541 resident permits, 131 non-resident permits, 427 resident senior permits, 15 non-resident veteran, and 30 non-resident veteran senior permits for a total of 1,144 permits since they went on sale at the beginning of the year.
Since January 15th?
Yeah, well, no, they went on sale effective January 3rd when the office reopened after the holiday. Yeah, for a total of $45,950. So it just shows you that people love a deal, and that the reach of online permitting extends very far, especially as it pertains to the recreational fishery. So that's my sort of information on that. I really don't think that until we have a year of us with the change of date that any year comparisons are going to really yield anything, but I will continue to give year-to-date totals monthly.
Cool, thanks.
If that's your preference. We also have shellfish area openings. We did get confirmation from DMF that we are clear to open the Mills River and Prince Cove effective February 15th. So that will be what actually happens. Last month I just showed you what it would potentially look like, and now this is for real. So Mills River, Prince Cove, open effective February 15th. And also effective February 15th, we are removing the commercial closure within the temporarily designated recreational only area at Bay Street. There's no, sometimes winter just happens in late February through April now, and there's no reason to keep the commercial fishery back from a resource that has been utilized to its extent by the recreational fishery. It can now be open to everybody. So we'll be doing that. And again, I envision next year that there won't be a commercial closure because we don't have another big year of oysters at Bay Street. So we will continue to use it as a relay area for cohogs, but I envision it being open to everyone when it opens in November of 2023. after having closed on May 1st.
Great. Any questions? Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
And that's it for your report, right?
Yeah, unless anyone has any questions for me.
I'm gonna move on to our, we don't have any new business, but we have a transfer hearing on Mark Begley's request.
It's a renewal.
Mark is here. Please tell us a little bit about the site for the renewal, 10-year renewal.
10-year renewal, yes. Again, my name is Mark Begley, manager of Beach Point Shellfish LLC. Live in West Barnstable, have had a grant since 1999, and just looking to renew it. 90-something% of what I grow is oysters. Occasionally grow a couple of different varieties of clams, actually 3, occasionally steamers and quahogs, and more recently butter clams, aka small ocean quahogs or surf clams. And Amy may have a map that would show where it is, but it's in the kind of the northeast corner of the aquaculture
Oh yeah, I don't have
area.
access to my aquaculture management tool from here.
Okay.
But yeah, this is.
It's a long, skinny.
It's
Very
two-
long
two
and skinny.
parcels, yeah.
It's a good walk. And it's also, that's why I mainly focus on oysters, because it's the last to clear with the tide and first to get covered by the tide coming in on the north side. So it fouls nets pretty quickly. It's good for the oysters though.
Great. Any issues from Natural Resources?
Oh, none at all.
Any questions for Mr. Begley? Great. So, you know that we don't approve this. It now goes to the town manager for a hearing. And he'll listen to the tape, or how does that work? You
So,
just
yeah, so currently
report.
our renewal hearings, transfer hearings are still held via Zoom. And so I attend as the Shellfish Constable, and then Christopher Nappy is the other natural resource officer that is appointed as a hearing officer. And so he runs the hearing. When it comes time for me to submit comments from natural resources, I give the date that the application was renewed by the Shellfish Committee, how many members were in favor of recommending approval.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to recommend approval.
I make a motion to recommend approval.
Right, moved,
Second.
seconded, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. Let's see, status of repair of Scudder Lane.
I have no updates unless our town council liaison does. I have nothing to offer still. But it will continue to be a standing agenda item as long as you would like it to continue to be one.
When do we expect, if I may, Paul, when does the town expect to actually perform the work, you know?
I'll have to get back to you on that, Stuart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I can update, I was
Great.
speaking to the town engineer that's working on it, Paul Graves, I believe is his name, and he said they're still on schedule to have a second public meeting sometime at the end of winter or in the spring. Couldn't narrow it down, but that's roughly what they said at the last public meeting, to be somewhere around that. And I asked the same question about when they might be doing the work, and it was sounding like it would be in, a year from now, something like that at the earliest.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Anybody have anything to add? Great. I'll move on to corporate leasing of aquaculture licenses, originally brought by committee, brought to the committee by Al Supernaut. It's a continued discussion. So I wasn't here at the last meeting. I see there was a discussion based on the minutes that have been approved. And how did you leave it?
Let me pass this out
Okay.
to everybody. You want to come in this way?
Awesome, thank you.
One. I'll take the one. This is, what this is here is what Dave Ryan and the shellfish growers that constitute over 60% of the usage of leases in Barnstable Harbor. In other words, the families that have multiple leases farm 60% of the leases in Barnstable Harbor. Everybody got one. And this is kind of, let me have Dave go through this because he basically put it together when talking with everybody.
Sure, yeah, Dave Ryan from Katuitt. So after the last meeting, I continued to talk with different growers from Barnstable and start to hash out some suggested language for a regulation change. As it turns out, and Amy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm pretty close. There's 54 or 55 sites at Barnstable Harbor, and 10 family businesses work on, it's either 37 or 38 of those 54 sites. So it represents actually closer to 70% of the activity at Barnstable is already, small businesses that are owned by different families. And I've got a list of all those aggregate people. So I drafted some language. I get a lot of suggestions from Mark Begley and from other growers. Paul, I feel bad I didn't send you a copy of it, but I did try to. I sent this draft, and Chloe, I didn't send it to you, but I did send it to everybody that I identified just by going through the map of who's working out there on more than one site. So I think that that some of this language addresses the concern of any one business acquiring, a majority of the acreage in the harbor. The 14 acre represents if the 1-2 acre site that Cape Cod Oyster Company is issued right now, plus the 6 that between Al and my families has licensed, that would equal 14 acres. Wayne Hayes is right behind us at 6 sites. But then many other families have 2, 3, or 4 sites. Another concern that we addressed, that 40 acre number came in simply because between Katuitt Oyster Company and Cape Cod Oyster Company, if those 6 extra sites were licensed to Cape Cod Oyster Company, then our acreage would be approaching 40, which is where Chris Gajulo's at. With Katuitt Oyster Company. Again, I think that back in the late '90s, when these aquaculture regulations were created, we didn't have an industry. That 2 acres was kind of picked out of the sky because and what we've seen is that it's really difficult or impossible to have a full-time year-round business on just 2 acres. And so these different families have been able to, through transfers and other means, acquire multiple sites. And so again, it's just to reflect so that the regulations reflect more of what is happening out at the harbor, so that reporting becomes more efficient, accountability is greater, with a single individual being responsible for all the acreage. And again, I think I made the point at the last meeting, the town still has full control whether the license is issued to Dave Ryan or to Cape Cod Oyster Company. We have to go through a yearly renewal, and we have to go through a complete renewal every 10 years, like Mark did tonight. like Mark's company did tonight. So,
There's a couple of other things on here. I talked to Jake, he had called me after the last meeting and voiced a couple of concerns that he had, which we incorporated in here. One of which is the annual fee. We had a $200 per acre, and he thought that $250 was more appropriate because then it equaled the amount of money that the commercial fishermen paid for a grant,
for master license.
which is fine. That was number one. Number two, he was concerned because he doesn't have a grant, but he'd like to get one, and he didn't want these companies to consolidate all the acres into one lease. So which I don't think the town would do it anyway, but what he wanted to do was just leave each lease the way it is with the meets and bounds, the 2 acres, wherever it may be. If you have 14 acres like we have, they're all kind of spread out, but they're all 2-acre parcels. So he was concerned about the transferability. If it was a big chunk, then he wouldn't have the opportunity to, if somebody wanted to get rid of 2 acres, then he wouldn't, if it was one big chunk, he wouldn't have the opportunity to do that. So we put that into the regulations. There's really nothing else in here. The other concern was which we did talk about at the last meeting, which was sort of the takeover of somebody coming in and wanting a bunch of acres, and how do you avoid that? Well, we're avoiding it by just putting a maximum, which happens to be our maximum right now in Barnstable Harbor. So we try to incorporate all that, plus the input from the growers, and this is what we came up with. I'd like some comments from
Cool.
them.
Anybody have any questions? I have a question. The 40 acres is north and south,
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
So total within the town.
okay? And limited to 20s per side?
Well, the way we have it written there, it's 14-acre max at Barnstable.
So then 16 on the south side? 26,
Yeah.
excuse me.
I guess.
Just because that's what, Chris Katuah Oyster already holds 35 or 38 or 34, whatever the number is. And then Cape Cod Oyster Company is less than that. But if Cape Cod Oyster ended up having 14 acres at Barnstable Harbor, that plus our acreage on the south side would equal something just a little less than 40.
Gotcha.
So it's somewhat arbitrary, but it kind of reflects what's already out there, and but most importantly, addressing that we or anybody else is not looking to grow beyond 14 acres at Barnstable.
So you're using Katuah Oyster as kind of the benchmark because they have approximately 40 acres.
Because I believe they have the most, yeah.
Right. And I recall I was on the committee when we, built these regulations back in the 90s. And I recall that the owner of Katuah Oyster at the time gave away some of his acreage and pared it down to what it is today. But you're using that as the benchmark, and it's just a matter of whether you say 20 on each side or you're 14 and 26. That's kind of odd. But
Well,
whatever.
we did the 14 because that's what we have now.
I get it.
Okay.
And then the annual fee for the corporation, you say that would be 20 or 250 per acre. So that's a statutory fee,
Right.
and you need a home rule petition to change it. And we'd look to you to do that.
Yeah, in other words, there's some towns have done it.
I'm aware of one that did it, Mattapoisett, I think, is,
Mattapoisett and there's another one, I think.
Fairhaven?
No,
Or is it
wasn't
just Fairhaven? Somewhere on the south coast.
It's whoever kicked Rod Taylor out of Rod
Might have been.
Taylor's Seafood.
Well, that would have been me, but, that was Fairhaven. But he also had, sites in Mattapoisett.
Yeah, you got was an answer.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's, I appreciate the fact that, you know, you're putting that in there, and there was some discussion a few years ago, and the liaison that we had at the time was going to work on a home rule petition, and it never went anywhere. And I have no idea, do you know how difficult that would be?
No, not.
What is a home rule, home?
So it's when your local legislators go to Beacon Hill and
Oh.
carve out an exception to the statute.
Okay.
Because again, that $25 is in the Mass
Right.
General laws.
Right.
So I deal with entities all the time, corporations, LLCs and the like. And I'm trying to figure out how there's a mechanism, or what kind of mechanism can be built into these regulations so that there is the local person that's connected to the entity. You set it up, you know, it's ABC LLC, and then all of a sudden your manager changes and the manager becomes, you know, John Smith from Arkansas. And how's that person connected to the town? DJ?
So, I like where this is going. I'm just wondering, do we take the name out of the grants completely and just have it one entity or not? I mean, under like, say, you know, every 14 acres. I mean, I'm wondering if, you know, we up the limit of acreage per person and somehow you can combine, you know, acreage under a subcategory of an entity. And then, you know, as far as proving, I mean, there's the home rule, but also is there a way to say, you know, is this person a stakeholder in that company, you know? I don't know how that would work at all, but I mean, that would definitely hold people liable to
Yeah,
being
yeah.
part of that company, you know, cause I know for damn sure I'm not paying Joe Schmo, you know, 20% of my company just to have a grant, so.
Stuart, if you have,
Yeah.
oops, sorry.
It's been a long time since I looked at anything like this, but when you form a corporation, you have officers of that corporation are written into that corporation. Don't you have some restraints on that as to who can come along and be added in there or taken out?
All depends on the entity. And LLCs, you can have a single member corporation. One person, president, treasurer, you know, everything. Same with LLCs, you can have a single member LLC.
Who has to be a resident in the town?
Well, that's,
That's the,
is that the requirement? If that's the requirement, then you get that person all okay with the town, and then the next day, that person changes, and we now have a different person who's not a resident. Does Amy then go to the Secretary of State's records and say, oh, wait a minute, that person changed?
so when they write their contract for their corporation, like I say, it's been a long time, they can't spell that out in that paperwork that says this is the way it has to be?
My
Or can
suggestion to
we-
you is that contract, as you call it, the formation papers would be as vague as possible. So you can make it as broad as possible. It's the town that is trying to narrow that down, not the entity. Mark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, a number of years ago, there was a subcommittee formed to talk about this issue. And there was some wording that was put together at the time, I don't remember exactly the wording, but it said that there had to be a resident that was either the head of the corporation or on the board. There was some wording that was tying the corporation had to include someone that was a resident of Barnstable. And again, I don't know what records might still be around for what was covered
Actually just
before.
said individual or corporation as long as individual or president of corporation is a majority shareholder and can prove to the satisfaction of the licensing authority that they are domiciled.
In the town.
These are the, from the back in the day,
doesn't-
2014.
I mean, this covers, number 3 covers what you're talking about. Have its headquarters in the town and have a resident of the town as an officer or manager. Now, with your point, if you have a corporation, you have a resident of the town as the manager, and, for some reason, you get another manager that's a resident of the town, that's not gonna change anything. But for some reason, if you got a manager that wasn't a resident of the town, when the lease came up for renewal, you could deny the lease.
Well, if that entity's foolish enough not to change it before the renewal.
Yeah,
But then in further,
that's
so
the
it's
point.
not, it's not any different than what takes place now, because every single year, we have to show proof of residency.
Yeah,
Just
I
to
had that
get
on
a
my
yearly renewal.
question, because you said yearly renewal. I'm not familiar with that, but it's in the regulations that you have to go to natural resources.
I me, myself, and my son, Al, my wife, we all have to prove we're residents of the town of Barnstable. They get a stack of paper this thick every single year,
Gotcha.
just determining, reestablishing a proof of residency every single year.
So I mean, I don't see that if you got the officer or manager has to be a resident of the town, then it has to be a resident of town every year, just like it is now. What's the difference?
What do you think about including a transfer fee?
Sure.
If it's easier to
why
get,
not?
if it's easier to get your that way.
It might be.
Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I know that transfers happen all the time.
Right.
And the town, I think, loses out because of that. And I'd like to see that changed.
Well, what would you change it to?
A transfer fee?
No, but I mean, how much?
Oh, I have no idea.
Well,
Big bucks.
think of a number between 1 and 10. What do you mean, like a $500 transfer fee or
Something, it should be something.
$1,000 transfer fee?
Is there a transfer fee now?
No.
I know, the only thing that they have to do is pay the $125 application because it's treated as a new site
Gotcha.
at that point.
Yep.
That's not a bad idea.
I will also say that $250 per acre doesn't cover the cost of service currently issued to the aquaculture industry.
Well, it's better than 25.
Well, it certainly is, but you still need a rationale to be able to affect that change without a home rule petition.
What would be a more reasonable cost per acre?
That is something we're working on.
Okay. You suggested that if you've got the grants set up, they're all GI or GPS?
Yeah, the way they are now.
Yeah, just leave those intact, is what you're
Right.
saying, okay.
That was Jake's concern,
Yep.
and I understand
I
what
think
he's
it's,
talking about.
yeah,
I would just
please, yeah. go ahead.
ask, Jake also called me in between last meeting and this meeting a couple of days ago, and I would think that it's probably best to let him speak his own words rather than to speak for him.
Yep. And he's not here tonight.
He is not.
So I'll go back to the time that we adopted these regulations back in the 90s. And in the back of my mind is Peter Jason talking, and he's saying that I know what's going to happen in Barnstable Harbor, and it's going to be conglomerates are going to come in and they'll be owning Barnstable Harbor. And, that is kind of ringing true now, because all of a sudden it's going to be a couple of corporations running the 55 sites. That's what I
The
see.
10 families that run it now.
Yeah, I get it.
You can't run a business on 2 acres,
No, I understand that. Believe me, I understand how.
so, if you want the industry to thrive, you know, it's not gonna thrive without it. It's not.
Yeah. So this is, yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would just also state that we have a number of people who operate on small farms that run successful businesses. Just because they're not successful to the extent that larger companies that operate in this town operate on, doesn't mean that they're less successful.
Gotcha.
You can
I
operate
can't
an
understand
aquaculture
what you're
farm on 2 acres.
Excuse me?
You can operate a successful aquaculture farm on 2 acres. We have a number of growers who do. And whether you consider them to be hardy farmers or not, there's no reason why that land that would otherwise be in public trust can't be issued to those residents of this town.
So you're against it?
I'm not against it. I'm against pieces of what you're proposing. I think there's probably common ground somewhere in here, but I'm not a fan of everything that's on that piece of paper.
Mark, do you recall who was on the subcommittee? You said it myself.
I was not, but I went to all their meetings.
Was that,
I think I was.
Les Hemler was on it, I know, you were on it.
that was the one that we had a whole, is that the one that Wayne referred to at the last meeting? Where we had a whole lot of language changes that were voted on and approved over the course of probably 18 months.
Yeah.
And then between the time of the final approval by this committee, DNR, cut and pasted and crossed out and inserted all brand new language. So, that was my last Shellfish Committee meeting for 5 years.
Gotcha.
When after that episode, because it did not reflect the work of the committee. It reflected the work of natural resources.
So on the subcommittee at that time were Les Hemla, Richard Haskell, who was an independent member of the Shellfish Committee, Jared Hemla, Christopher Gargiulo, David Ryan, and Florence Lowell. With town staff member President Tom Marcotti.
Who was the town staff?
Tom Marcotti?
And Mrs. Lowell, what was her name?
Florence?
Lawrence?
Yeah.
Has anybody talked to the town attorney about this?
I've had conversations with town leadership
Okay.
about this as a concept, to give them a heads up this conversation is happening.
Sure.
And legal, of course, came up as a stop. Also, Amy's department on sort of a more staff level before it got further up in the town hall chain. And so, so no real in-depth conversation. Like none of those folks have seen a piece of paper with any of this, just sort of the general idea of what was being proposed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to get an idea from them about what direction, if it came out of this room, which direction it would also have to be going through town professional staff. And those would be Amy's operation writ large as well as legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it make any sense to have a subcommittee again, just on this one issue? You're shaking your
It
head,
was a
Al.
very-
You're smiling.
Let me
Mark
just say
is-
this, very bad taste in everybody's mouth after the last one. Very, very bad.
Yeah. Well, let's change that. Put a little Listerine in there and fix that up.
It's not a, you just, very bad.
Just out of interest, I have a question. On both the north and the south side, the capability of acreage available for raising shellfish, is that at its maximum now, or is there more acreage available on either one of those?
Oh, no, we're essentially maxed out with all of the conditionally approved areas that are now under mooring area closures. There's not room for expansion with user group conflict in 3 bays. I mean, Shoestring Bay and Papaneset are basically dead. Water quality is tanking, habitat is degrading, and Barnstable Harbor is an ACEC.
Plus staff. Do you have enough staff to even manage what's,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Good. Did you answer your question?
Yes, and all those docks.
Well, it's just like if we're maxed out with the acreage that we have now, do you allow a set number of people to continue on in perpetuity with that land? Or does it eventually get divvied back out to the community at large?
So you wanna put a sunset on ownership.
I'm not saying I would like to put a sunset on anything. I'm just saying that
that's
some
what
of
you're
these suggestions
Yep.
lead to, like, in perpetuity, Cape Cod Oyster being an entity and not allowing another company to grow. What gives you the right to do that?
Again, you have every year and every 10 years, you have the ability to ask the questions. If you're not doing the right thing, you can take the grants away. That's always been the case. If somebody doesn't do the right thing, if somebody doesn't produce what they're supposed to produce, you can take it away.
I will say, as someone who has sat through adjudicatory hearings, to remove a licensed site from someone, it's not that simple. It's written into the regulations that way, but taking away somebody's livelihood is not an easy task, and typically, unless public health at large is at risk, it will not happen. You'll lawyer up.
It's happened.
Where has it happened? In the town?
Yeah, didn't somebody have a lease that they took away recently?
Yeah, because they largely put public health at risk, and it
Well,
deserved to be
there you
taken
go.
away. And it was not simple, even though the issue to public health was very clear.
How long ago?
2018.
2018.
Okay. So where are we gonna take this? I think it needs further discussion, there's no question about it. I appreciate this.
Well,
Is
what,
this your best foot forward?
I think so, because
Okay.
it covers your, the big question always comes down to this resident issue. And if the manager of the operation, in this case with Cape Cod Oyster Company, it would be Dave Ryan, he lives in the town of Barnstable. Every year, he files all the paperwork. Now, if he doesn't live in the town of Barnstable, every year, or the first year that he doesn't live in the town, they're gonna say, well, you don't live in the town of Barnstable. Now, that
So
would
does
either
that
make,
mean- Let me just stop you. Does that mean, if you made that mistake, shame on you, but if you did,
yeah,
that mean your corporation loses all of them?
well, I don't know, that would be up to the town.
Well, it would
But
have to be
it-
built in.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if you were that stupid, that wouldn't happen. But I mean, if but if, let's say that Dave was retiring and he was moving to South Carolina.
And you were
his-
foolish enough not to
and
replace
his-
them
or Exactly,
before.
and his son took over
Yeah.
and lived in the town of Barnstable, or moved to the town of Barnstable, then, seeing how he already works for the company, that might have a bearing. So, I mean, it's not, this is not something that's not already in place. There's nothing here that isn't covered.
So your only nexus to the town would be your manager.
Yeah.
Okay.
Manager, owner, whatever you wanna call
And the business was centered and located in headquarters in the town.
So that's more than just the manager.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's,
them. You'd have to have your,
I know that that's what it said here.
Yeah.
But I wanted to hear it.
Yeah. In other words, your headquarters, as it says here, headquarters to me means where you're
Principal address.
operating.
Principal address of the corporation?
Yeah, principal.
Or LLC,
Or, where your plant is, where you do.
where you get served process by the sheriff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, with these regulations, it would pretty much be owner operator, right? Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be individual permits, it'd be an owner operator license now. So,
you know, it's still, it always will be. You know,
Yeah.
It's always, it's such a unique business. It's, like I said, we're not getting deeded land from the town. It's a license. The Commonwealth still owns the property. The town still has full control on a yearly basis, on a 10-year basis. It's just, it's cleaning up the way these, to better reflect the way all these farms are being operated. And it gives the DJ of the world, it gives Paul Hendricks, gives Paul Hamlin the ability to, to get a few more acres so that they can sustain a business, for their future.
The hardest part for us to get more acreage is, I think, is the people that got their names out there, got a grant, and they never step foot out there. That's the problem for people like us.
Right, right.
And if you guys say you got 14, how many other ones do people have that get even more than the 14? Because they have someone's name that they know. They might have 15, 20 really, that they're working. So I would say something needs to be done about that for the people that want to get more than are actually working out there.
Right.
That's the problem.
So that
There's a lot of people out there that have their names out there, ain't stepped foot out there.
Yeah.
That's why I think the stakeholder ordeal would be nice.
Well, there's rules in place for that. There's rules in place for it right now, albeit not very, in my opinion, not very substantial rules, but they're there.
So those
Right.
need to be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they-
oh, I would agree, yeah, good luck to us to prove that somebody's subleasing.
No, I think
Well,
what
you
we're
can
talking
look at an
about is
invoice,
is
can't
more,
you?
no, it's more
Well, I would
production
have to prove that
standard.
they're
Well,
not having
subleasing and
someone.
that, people that, so you guys, if you know somebody that have a friend has a couple acres out there, you could have 16, 17 acres if they have their names and they don't even step foot out there. So that's what takes up, not say you per se, but that's what takes up all the extra acreage for people like me that actually go out there and work every day.
Right.
There's a lot of people that don't go out there and work every day, but they're definitely subleasing, and like I think the bigger corporations have the money to go, yeah. That's how they get them. That's what holds us back.
See, I think this gives you a better opportunity to get that acreage.
Well, I don't, I don't see that in the details of this one. Maybe you're right, but I'm saying that's what the problem is. I think for the other people that just want to work out there and are actually working out there.
So
There's a lot of land out there that people's names on the list and never step foot out there. And
Go ahead,
that
Pat.
working
So
grants.
yeah.
there's
who's
more to be
running them?
written then. Is there more to be written into this? I mean, is it gonna cover all of the situations that we're listening to, because everybody wants the same thing?
Amy?
Are we gonna protect them, so that they can
I like two
reach
more
those
acres.
goals?
So I guess if Al, what you're saying is your suggested regulation changes that Dave has drafted is your best foot forward, would you be comfortable with me putting them on the town website as a suggestion from this committee, and then putting these out to every person that's on the wait list and all of the growers so they can actively participate in this discussion?
I don't think it should come from the committee, because it's not a collective, committee paper.
Right, so what would that look like then? Because I do think that this requires
Presented by
vetting.
an aquaculturist,
Okay,
and that, they'd like to see the rules change, and this is what they proposed. But it shouldn't come from the committee. I like the idea that more people buy into the discussion.
And if you call that a subcommittee with limited period of time to work and, one or two more public meetings to gather more input and draft it.
Sometimes I find that subcommittees that work, kind of in a closed room, fewer people, you can get more details hammered out, as opposed to a public forum like this. And then bring it back for a more broader discussion. Just a thought.
Well, I think Dave might be right. If you're gonna do something like that, it's gotta be 30, 60 days, that's it. In and out.
So, it's Paul Hendricks, is that you? Okay. To Paul's point, if he's concerned about the corporation all of a sudden, it's controlling 14 acres because that's what it holds in its name 14 lease sites. All of a sudden, somebody comes and says, hey, would you operate mine? And now you're operating 2 or 3 others. Do you build in a restriction that says you can only operate on the grants or the licensed area that you have in your name?
That's not what they say now.
I understand, but you're throwing this whole thing on the table.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, that's not a problem.
So to Paul's point, if he wants to see that if you're gonna control 14 acres, then that's it. You get 14 acres to control, that's it, no more.
Yeah, that's more than fine with me.
Well, that's what we're saying.
Okay.
But in other words, in the regulations as of today, what Paul is saying is correct. Anybody can run anybody's acres. And it's in the regulations.
Is it, or is it just,
No, it's in the regulations,
okay,
right?
So the license is issued to the individual.
right,
However, there are no restrictions on who operates that farm.
Correct.
For instance, Margaret Hill O'Connell holds a license. Tyler Hagenstein runs her farm.
and the owner of the license,
Is simply the license holder.
right,
We don't have a requirement for the license holder to be the person physically out there doing the farming. That's not written into the regulations. We have a prohibition against subleasing, which I think is a difficult thing to prove that's happening, because how are we supposed to find out if someone's 1099ing someone or not every year?
it's impossible, I suspect.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No, huh? So this needs a little further discussion.
Well, do
We
you think,
agree? Yes?
do you think that, what you brought up the legal end of it because you're a lawyer. But what I don't have any problem with a subcommittee, but I do have a problem if it's gonna go for any length of time. I think that's not good. Only because of the taste of the last go around.
Okay. I think it needs to be distributed, this information needs to be distributed.
Yeah.
Input needs to be received from the
Stakeholders.
stakeholders that you were talking about.
Yeah,
I think our liaison needs to bring it back, this paperwork,
Yeah.
I think, back to the people that you deal with,
Yes.
get their input,
yeah. I don't have a problem with any of that.
yeah. And just keep the ball
I'm
moving.
trying, yeah, because this is different than it was last month.
As
quite
I
a bit
expected it would be.
Yeah, quite a bit different.
Good.
Because we're trying to get everybody's opinion and put it all together. So, yeah, let's do it again. But with an end in sight.
And by all means, you get Peter Jason's input on this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's not enough history around this table.
Nothing.
Yeah, nobody
it really
knows.
is.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows the true meaning of that.
No, actually, I'm old enough to.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew Peter Jason too. My dad went to high school
Oh,
with him. I will say regulatory changes go to public hearing in either October or November. So if we have something wrapped up by September, I think we're doing good.
Say that again. I can't hear you, mask. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just trying not to kill you. So yeah, regulatory changes proposed go to public hearing in either October or November to be effective the following year. So long as we have something that everyone can agree on in August or September, we're doing pretty good.
You hear that?
Sort of, yeah.
So our next meeting is March, and if at that point we put a subcommittee together to take
Maybe.
30 or 60 days to get back to us by March, April, May, June 1st, back here, and then we can work June, July, August, to be ready for September. That is the schedule.
And let's leave this on the agenda for next meeting,
Mhm.
fair enough?
Regular. Every month, an update. Yeah.
Until we finish it?
Yeah.
Holding feet to fire,
Who's?
great,
Who do we do the subcommittee?
I'm just trying to think what the sequence of this, either subcommittee or stakeholder input. I think one of the things that happened last time with that subcommittee was the feedback really came back from the town at the very end of the process. Amy, you mentioned you've already looked at it, you have some concerns. Should getting some feedback from natural resources be earlier in the process than maybe at the end of the
Should be on the,
process?
should be on the subcommittee.
Yeah, I think that was part of the issue, was that the subcommittee back in 2013 going into 2014 was comprised of some larger growers, and that was it. And those were the people who were putting together these suggested regulatory changes and then just bringing them to the committee with very little input from any stakeholders or from my department. So obviously, that doesn't just leave a bad taste in your mouth, that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And so I think moving forward, there's definitely room for compromise. Like I said, I'm amenable to this conversation. I don't know that I agree with exactly what you have down on that paper, but I do think that there's a pathway for streamlining annual reporting, for untimely death situations and keeping family farms operating, for acreage limitations on the north side being looked at and possibly addressed in a different way than they are now. But I think if it's just going to be a subcommittee of like Barnstable Sea Farm, Katuitt Oyster, Cape Cod Oyster, and Wayne Hayes Seafood, we have an issue, So it has to be more inclusive of varied stakeholders if there is a subcommittee to be had, in my opinion.
good.
Wasn't the town involved with the subcommittee last go around?
The staff was present to take minutes because, by and large, for the beginning of those meetings, none of them were recorded.
They were involved. My recollection was they were involved 100% of the time.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to matters not reasonably anticipated. Do I have any? Having none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good thing.